The 20th Book of the Odysseys of Homer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Phil Schempf. The 20th Book of the Odysseys of Homer. Translated by George Chapman. The Argument. Ulysses, in the wooers' beds, resolving first to kill the maids. That sentence giving off, his care for other objects doth prepare. Another argument. Upsilon. Jove thunder chides, but cheers the king, the wooers' prides discomfiting. Ulysses in the entry laid his head, and under him an ox hide newly flayed, above him sheep fell store, and over those Eurynomé cast mantles. His repose would bring no sleep yet, studying the ill he wished the wooers, who came by him still with all their wenches, laughing, wantoning, in mutual lightness, which his heart did sting, contending two ways, if, all patience fled, he should rush up and strike those strumpets dead, or let that night be last, and take the extreme of those proud wooers, that were so supreme in pleasure of their high-fed fantasies. His heart did bark within him to surprise their sports with spoils. No fell she-mastiff can, amongst her whelps, fly eagerer on a man she doth not know, yet scents him something near, and fain would come to please her tooth and tear, that his disdain to see his roof so filed with those foul fashions grew within him wild to be in blood of them. But finding best in his free judgment to let passion rest, he chid his angry spirit, and beat his breast, and said: "Forbear, my mind, and think on this. There hath been time when bitter agonies have tried thy patience. Call to mind the day in which the Cyclop, which passed manly sway of violent strength, devour'd thy friends. Thou then stoodst firmly bold, till from that hellish den thy wisdom brought thee off, when naught but death thy thoughts resolved on." This discourse did breathe the fiery boundings of his heart, that still lay in that esture, without end his ill yet manly suffering. But from side to side it made him toss apace. You have not tried a fellow roasting of a pig before a hasty fire, his belly yielding store of fat and blood, turn faster, labour more to have it roast, and would not have it burn, than this and that way his unrest made turn his thoughts and body, would not quench the fire, and yet not have it heighten his desire past his discretion, and the fit enough of haste and speed, that went to all the proof his well-laid plots, and his exploits requir'd, since he, but one, to all their deaths aspir'd. In this contention Pallas stoop'd from heaven, stood over him, and had her presence given a woman's form, who sternly thus began: "Why, thou most sour and wretched fated man Of all that breathe, yet liest thou thus awake? The house in which thy cares so toss and take Thy quiet up is thine, thy wife is there, And such a son, as if thy wishes were To be suffic'd with one they could not mend." "Goddess," said he, "'tis true, but I contend To right their wrongs, and, though I be but one, To lay unhelp'd and wreakful hand upon This whole resort of impudence, that here Their rude assemblies never will forbear. And yet a greater doubt employs my care, That if their slaughters in my reaches are, And I perform them, Jove and you not pleas'd, How shall I fly their friends, and would stand seiz'd Of counsel to resolve this care in me?" "Wretch," she replied, "a friend of worst degree Might win thy credence, that a mortal were. I and use to second thee, though nothing near So pow'rful in performance, nor in care. Yet I, a Goddess, that have still had share In thy achievements, and thy person's guard, Must still be doubted by thy brain, so hard To credit anything above thy pow'r, And that must come from heav'n, if every hour There be not personal appearance made, And aid direct giv'n, that may sense invade. I tell thee therefore clearly, if there were Of divers languag'd men an army here Of 50 companies, all driving hence Thy sheep and oxen, and with violence offer'd To charge us, and besiege us round, Thou shouldst their prey reprise, and them confound. Let sleep then seize thee. To keep watch all night consumes the spirits, and makes dull the sight. Thus pour'd the Goddess sleep into his eyes, And reascended th' Olympian skies. When care and lineament resolving sleep Had laid his temples in his golden steep, His wise in chaste wit worthy wife did rise, First sitting up in her soft bed, her eyes Open'd with tears, in care of her estate, Which now her friends resolv'd to terminate To more delays, and make her merry one. Her silent tears then ceas'd, her orison This Queen of Women to Diana made: "Rev'rend Diana, let thy darts invade My woful bosom, and my life deprive, Now at this instant, or soon after drive My soul with tempests forth, and give it way To those far off dark vaults, where never day Hath pow'r to shine, and let them cast it down Where refulent Oceanus doth crown His curled head, where Pluto's orchard is, And entrance to our after miseries. And such stern whirlwinds ravish'd to that stream Pandareus' daughters, when the Gods to them Had reft their parents, and left them alone, Poor orphan children, in their mansion, Whose desolate life did Love's sweet Queen incline To nurse with pressed milk and sweetest wine, Whom Juno deck'd beyond all other dames With wisdom's light, and beauty's moving flames, Whom Phoebe goodliness of stature render'd, And to whose fair hands wise Minerva tender'd The loom and needle in their utmost skill. And while Love's Empress scal'd th' Olympian hill To beg of lightning loving Jove, since he The means to all things knows, and doth decree Fortunes, infortunes to the mortal race, For those poor virgins, th' accomplish'd grace Of sweet nuptials, the fierce Harpies prey'd On ev'ry good and miserable maid, And to the hateful Furies gave them all In horrid service. Yet may such fate fall From steep Olympus on my loathed head, Or fair chair'd Phoebe strike me instant dead, That I may undergo the gloomy shore To visit great Ulysses' soul, before I soothe my idle blood, and wed a worse. And yet, beneath how desperate a curse Do I live now! It is an ill that may Be well endur'd, to mourn the whole long day So night's sweet sleeps, that make a man forget Both bad and good, in some degree Would let my thoughts leave grieving. But, both day and night, Some cruel God gives my sad memory sight. This night, methought, Ulysses grac'd my bed In all the goodly state with which he led The Grecian army, which gave joys extreme To my distress, esteeming it no dream, But true indeed; and that conceit I had, That when I saw it false I might be mad, Such cruel fates command in my life's guide. By this the morning's orient dews had dyed The earth in all her colours, when the king, In his sweet sleep, suppos'd the sorrowing That she us'd, waking in her plaintive bed, To be her mourning, standing by his head, As having known him there; who straight arose, And did again within the hall dispose The carpets and the cushions, where before They serv'd the seats. The hide without the door He carried back, and then with held up hands He pray'd to him that heav'n and earth commands: "O Father Jove, if through the moist and dry You willing brought me home, when misery Had punish'd me enough by your free dooms, Let some of these within those inner rooms, Startled with horror of some strange ostent, Come here, and tell me that great Jove hath bent Threat'nings without at some lewd men within." To this his prayer Jove shook his sable chin, And thunder'd from those pure clouds that above The breathing air in bright Olympus move. Divine Ulysses joy'd to hear it roar, Report of which a woman miller bore Straight to his ears; for near to him there ground Mills for his corn, that twice 6 women found Continual motion, grinding barley meal, And wheat, man's marrow. Sleep the eyes did seal Of all the other women, having done Their usual task; which yet this dame alone Had scarce given end to, being of all the rest Least fit for labour. But when these sounds press'd her ears, above The rumbling of her mill, she let that stand, Look'd out, and heav'n's steep hill saw clear And temp'rate; which made her, unware Of giving any comfort to his care In that strange sign he pray'd for, thus invoke: "O King of men, and Gods, a mighty stroke Thy thund'ring hand laid on the cope of stars; No cloud in all the air, and therefore wars Thou bidst to some men in thy sure ostent. Perform to me, poor wretch, the main event, and make this day the last and most extreme, in which the Wooers' pride shall solace them with whorish banquets in Ulysses' roof, that with sad toil to grind them meal enough have quite dissolved my knees. Vouchsafe then now thy thunders may their latest feast foreshow." This was the boon Ulysses begg'd of Jove, which, with his thunder, through his bosom drove a joy, that this vaunt breath'd: "Why now these men, despite their pride, will Jove make pay me pain." By this had other maids, than those that lay Mix'd with the Wooers, made a fire like day Amidst the hearth of th' illustrious hall; And then the prince, like a celestial, rose from his bed, to his embalm'd feet tied Fair shoes, his sword about his breast applied, Took to his hand his sharp piled lance, and met, Amidst the entry, his old nurse, that set His haste at sudden stand, to whom he said: "O my lov'd nurse, with what grace have you laid And fed my guest here! Could you so neglect His age, to lodge him thus? Though all respect I give my mother's wisdom, I must yet affirm it fail'd in this; For she hath set at much more price a man Of much less worth, without his person's note, And yet casts forth with ignominious hands, For his form's sake, a man much better. Do not fault make, good son, the faultless. He was giv'n his seat close to her side, and food till he would eat, Wine till his wish was serv'd; for she requir'd His wants, and will'd him all things he desir'd, Commanded her chief maids to make his bed; But he, as one whom sorrow only fed, And all infortune, would not take his rest In bed, and cov'rings fit for any guest, But in the entry, on an ox's hide Never at tanner's, his old limbs implied In warm sheep fells; yet over all we cast A mantle, fitting for a man more grac'd." He took her answer, left the house, and went, Attended with his dogs, to sift th' event Of private plots, betwixt him and his sire In common council. Then the crew entire Of all the household maids, Euryclea bad Bestir them through the house, and see it clad In all best form; gave all their parts, and one She set to furnish ev'ry seat and throne With needle works and purple cloths of state; Another set to scour and cleanse the plate; Another all the tables to make proud With porous sponges; others she bestow'd In all speed to the spring, to fetch from thence Fit store of water; all at all expense Of pains she will'd to be; for this to all Should be a day of common festival, And not a Wooer now should seek his home Elsewhere than there, but all were bid to come Exceeding early, and to be rais'd to heav'n With all the entertainment could be giv'n. They heard with greedy ears, and everything Put straight in practice. 20 to the spring Made speed for water; many in the house Took pains, and all were both laborious And skill'd in labour; many fell to fell And cleave their wood, and all did more than well. Then troop'd the lusty Wooers in, and then Came all from spring; at their heels loaded men With slaughter'd brawns, of all the herd the prize, That had been long fed up in sev'ral styes. Eumæus and his men convey'd them there. He, seeing now the king, began to cheer, And thus saluted him: "How now, my guest? Have yet your virtues found more interest In these great Wooers' good respects, or still Pursue they you with all their wonted ill?" "I would to heav'n, Eumæus," he replied, "The Deities once would take in hand their pride, That such unseemly fashions put in frame In others' roofs, as show no spark of shame." Thus these; and to these came Melanthius, Great guardian of the most egregious Rich Wooers' herds, consisting all of goats; Which he with 2 more drave, and made their cotes The sounding porticos of that fair court. Melanthius, seeing the king, this former sort Of upland language gave: "What! Still stay here, And dull these Wooers with thy wretched cheer? Not gone for ever yet? Why now I see This strife of cuffs betwixt the beggary, That yesterday assay'd to get thee gone, And thy more roguery, needs will fall upon My hands to arbitrate. Thou wilt not hence Till I set on thee; thy ragged impudence Is so fast footed. Are there not, beside, Other great banquetants? But you must tide At anchor still with us." He said nothing, but thought ill enough, and shook his head. Then came Philœtius, a chief of men. that to the wooers' all-devouring den A barren steer drave, and fat goats; for they In custom were with traffickers by sea, That who they would sent, and had utt'rance there. And for these likewise the fair porches were Hurdles and sheep pens, as in any fair. Philœtius took note in his repair Of seen Ulysses, being a man as well Giv'n to his mind's use as to buy and sell, Or do the drudgery that the blood desir'd, And standing near Eumæus, this enquir'd: "What guest is this that makes our house of late His entertainer? Whence claims he the state His birth in this life holds? What nation? What race? What country stands his speech upon? Or hardly portion'd by the terrible Fates? The structure of his lineaments relates A king's resemblance in his pomp of reign, Ev'n thus in these rags. But poorer men, That have no firm home, but range here and there As need compels, God keeps in this earth's sphere, As under water; and this tune he sings When he is spinning ev'n the cares of kings." Thus coming to him, with a kind of fear He took his hand, and, touch'd exceeding near With mere imagination of his worth, This salutation he sent loudly forth: "Health, father stranger! In another world Be rich and happy, though thou here art hurl'd At feet of never such insulting need. O Jove, there lives no one God of thy seed More ill to man than thou. Thou takest no ruth, When thou thyself hast got him in most truth, To wrap him in the straits of most distress, And in the curse of others' wickedness. My brows have sweat to see it, and mine eyes Broke all in tears, when, this being still the guise Of worthiest men, I have but only thought That down to these ills was Ulysses wrought, And that, thus clad, ev'n he is error driven, If yet he live and sees the light of heav'n. But if now dead, and in the house of hell, O me! O good Ulysses! That my weal Did ever wish, and when, but half a man Amongst the people Cephallenian, His bounty to his oxen's charge preferr'd One in that youth, which now is grown a herd Unspeakable for number, and feed there With their broad heads, as thick as of his ear A field of corn is to a man. Yet these, some men advise me, with this noted prease Of Wooers may devour, and wish me drive Up to their feasts with them, that neither give His son respect, though in his own free roof, Nor have the wit to fear th' infallible proof Of heav'nly vengeance, but make offer now This long lack'd king's possessions to bestow In their self shares. Methinks the mind in me Doth turn as fast, as in a flood or sea A raging whirl pit doth, to gather in To fishy death those swimmers in their sin, Or feeds a motion as circular To drive my herds away. But while the sun Bears up with life, 'twere heinous wrong to run To other people with them, and to trust Men of another earth. And yet more just It were to venture their laws, the main right Made still their masters, than at home lose quite Their right and them, and sit and grieve to see The wrong authoriz'd by their gluttony. And I had long since fled, and tried th' event With other proud kings, since more insolent These are than can be borne; but that ev'n still I had a hope that this, though born to ill, Would one day come from some coast, and their last In his roofs strew with ruins red and vast." "Herdsman," said he, "because thou art in show Nor lewd, nor indiscreet, and that I know There rules in thee an understanding soul, I'll take an oath, that in thee shall control All doubt of what I swear. Be witness, Jove, That sway'st the first seat of the throne above, This hospitable table, and this house, That still hold title for the strenuous son Of Laertes, that, if so you please, Your eyes shall witness Laertiades Arriv'd at home, and all these men, that reign In such excesses here, shall here lie slain." He answer'd: "Stranger, would just Jove would sign What you have sworn, in your eyes' beams should shine What pow'rs I manage, and how these my hands Would rise and follow where he first commands." So said Eumæus, praying all the sky That wise Ulysses might arrive and try. Thus while they vow'd, the Wooers sat as hard On his son's death, but had their counsels scar'd; For on their left hand did an eagle soar, And in her seres a fearful pigeon bore; Which seen, Amphinomus presaged: "O friends, our counsels never will receive their ends In this man's slaughter. Let us therefore ply our bloody feast, And make his oxen die." Thus came they in, cast off on seats their cloaks, And fell to giving sacrificing strokes Of sheep and goats, the chiefly fat and great, Slew fed up swine, and from the herd a neat. The inwards roasted, they dispos'd betwixt Their then observers, wine in flagons mix'd. The bowls Eumæus brought, Philœtius bread, Melanthius fill'd the wine. Thus drank and fed the feastful Wooers. Then the prince, in grace Of his close project, did his father place Amidst the paved entry, in a seat Seamless and abject, a small board, and meat Of the only inwards. In a cup of gold Yet set him wine, and bade him now drink bold. All his approaches he himself would free 'Gainst all the Wooers, since he would not see His court made popular, but that his sire Built it to his use. Therefore all the fire Blown in the Wooers' spleens he bade suppress, And that in hands nor words should they digress From that set peace his speech did then proclaim. They bit their lips, and wonder'd at his aim In that brave language. When Antinous said: "Though this speech, Grecians, be a mere upbraid, Yet this time give it pass. The will of Jove Forbids the violence of our hands to move, But of our tongues we keep the motion free. And therefore, if his further jollity Tempt our encounter with his braves, Let's check his growing insolence, though pride To speak fly passing high with him." The wise prince made no more spring of his speech, But let it fade. And now the heralds bore about the town The sacred hecatomb, to whose renown The fair hair'd Greeks assembled, and beneath Apollo's shady wood the holy death They put to fire; which, made enough, they drew, Divided all, that did in the end accrue To glorious satisfaction. Those that were Disposers of the feast did equal cheer Bestow on wretched Laertiades, With all the Wooers' souls. It so did please Telemachus to charge them. And for these Minerva would not see The malices the Wooers bore too much contain'd, that so Ulysses' mov'd heart might yet higher flow In wreakful anguish. There was wooing there, Amongst the rest, a gallant that did bear The name of one well learn'd in jests profane, His name Ctesippus, born a Samian, Who, proud because his father was so rich, Had so much confidence as did bewitch His heart with hope to wed Ulysses' wife. And this man said: "Hear me, my lords, in strife For this great widow. This her guest did share Even feast with us, with very comely care Of him that order'd it. For 'tis not good Nor equal to deprive guests of their food, And specially whatever guest makes way To that house where Telemachus doth sway. And therefore I will add to his receipt A gift of very hospitable weight, Which he may give again to any maid That bathes his grave feet, and her pains see paid, Or any servant else that the divine Ulysses' lofty battlements confine." Thus snatch'd he, with a valiant hand, From out the poor folk's common basket A neat's foot, and threw it at Ulysses; Who his head shrunk quietly aside, And let it shed his malice on the wall, The suff'ring man a laughter raising most Sardinian, with scorn and wrath mix'd, at the Samian. Whom thus the prince reprov'd: "Your valour won much graz'd, Ctesippus, And hath eas'd your mind with mighty profit, Yet you see it find no mark it aim'd at. The poor stranger's part Himself made good enough to 'scape your dart. But should I serve thee worthily, my lance Should strike thy heart through, and, in place T' advance thyself in nuptials with his wealth, Thy sire should make thy tomb here, that the foolish fire Of all such valours may not dare to show These foul indecencies to me. I now have years to understand my strength, And know the good and bad of things, and am No more at your large suff'rance, to behold My store consum'd with patience, see my cattle slain, My wine exhausted, and my bread in vain Spent on your licence. For to one then young So many enemies were match too strong. But let me never more be witness to Your hostile minds, nor those base deeds ye do. For, should ye kill me in my offer'd wreak, I wish it rather, and my death would speak Much more good of me, than to live and see Indignity upon indignity. My guests provok'd with bitter words and blows, My women servants dragg'd about my house To lust and rapture." This made silence seize The house throughout, till Damastorides At length the calm brake, and said: "Friend, forbear To give a just speech a disdainful ear. The guest no more touch, nor no servant here. Myself will to the prince and queen commend A motion grateful, if they please to lend Grateful receipt. As long as any hope Left wise Ulysses any passage ope To his return in our conceits, so long The queen's delays to our demand stood strong, In cause and reason; and our quarrels thus With guests, the queen, or her Telemachus, Set never foot amongst our lib'ral feast. For should the king return, though thought deceas'd, It had been gain to us, in finding him, To lose his wife. But now, since nothing dim The days break out that show he never more Shall reach the dear touch of his country's shore, Sit by your mother, in persuasion That now it stands her honour much upon To choose the best of us, and who gives most, To go with him home; for so, all things lost In sticking on our haunts so, you shall clear Recover in our no more concourse here, Possess your birthright wholly, eat and drink, And never more on our disgraces think." "By Jove, no, Agelaus; for I swear By all my father's sorrows, who doth err Far off from Ithaca, or rests in death, I am so far from spending but my breath To make my mother any more defer Her wishéd nuptials, that I'll counsel her To make her free choice, and, besides, will give Large gifts to move her. But I fear to drive, Or charge her hence; for God will not give way To any such course, if I should assay." At this, Minerva made for foolish joy The Wooers mad, and rous'd their late annoy To such a laughter as would never down. They laugh'd with others' cheeks, ate meat overflown With their own bloods, their eyes stood full of tears For violent joys, their souls yet thought of fears; Which Theoclymenus express'd, and said: "O wretches! Why sustain ye, well apaid, Your imminent ill? A night, with which death sees, Your heads and faces hides beneath your knees. Shrieks burn about you, your eyes thrust out tears. These fixed walls, and that main beam that bears The whole house up, in bloody torrents fall. The entry full of ghosts stands, full the hall Of passengers to hell; and under all The dismal shades, the sun sinks from the poles, And troubled air pours bane about your souls." They sweetly laugh'd at this. Eurymachus to mocks dispos'd, and said: "This new come to us is surely mad. Conduct him forth to light in the open market place. He thinks 'tis night within the house." "Eurymachus," said he, "I will not ask for any guide of thee. I both my feet enjoy, have ears and eyes, And no mad soul within me; and with these Will I go forth the doors, because I know That imminent mischief must abide with you, Which not a man of all the Wooers here Shall fly or 'scape. Ye all too highly bear Your uncurb'd heads; impieties ye commit, And every man affect with forms unfit." This said, he left the house, and took his way Home to Piræus, who, as free as day, Was of his welcome. When the Wooers' eyes Chang'd looks with one another, and their guise Of laughter still held on, still eas'd their breasts Of will to set the prince against his guests, Affirming that of all the men alive He worst luck had, and prov'd it worst to give Guests entertainment; for he had one there, A wand'ring hunter out of provender, An errant beggar every way, yet thought He was so hungry, that he needed nought But wine and victuals, nor knew how to do, Nor had a spirit to put a knowledge to, But liv'd an idle burthen to the earth. Another then stepp'd up, and would lay forth His lips in prophecy thus: "But would he hear his friends' persuasions, He should find it were more profit for him To put both abroad for the Sicilian people, that afford these feet Of men good price, and this would bring Good means for better guests." These words made wing to his ears idly, who had still his eye Upon his father, looking fervently When he would lay his long withholding hand On those proud Wooers. And, within command Of all this speech that pass'd, Icarius' heir, the wise Penelope, Her royal chair had plac'd of purpose. Their high dinner then, with all pleas'd palates These ridiculous men fell sweetly to, As joying they had slain such store of banquet. But there did not reign a bitterer banquet planet In all heav'n than that which Pallas had To that day driven, and with her able friend Now meant to oppose, since they till then Were in deserts so gross. End of the 20th Book.